We are excited to hear from the esteemed panel of speakers who will speak to land and water defense actions and strategies of solidarity. I would also just like to make a few housekeeping notes before we move on. As you have just noticed, parts of this webinar will be recorded and we will share them along with resources following the webinar in order to encourage people to take action in supporting land defense. The chat is disabled, but you may use the Q&A box to submit questions to panelists. We will have a limited time available for questions at the end to protect speaking time for our panelists. And next, I would like to introduce Rosalind Hampton, Assistant Professor of Black Studies in the Department of Social Justice Education and Faculty Co-Chair of Indigenous Education Network, who will be moderating the discussion and introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Katie. It's really, truly my honor to be part of this event on behalf of the Indigenous Education Network at OISE. The IEN recognizes Indigenous land and water defense as central to Indigenous education and to the work of the IEN. That work involves advancing Indigenous educational praxis and providing co-curricular support for and advocacy for Indigenous, Black, and Black Indigenous students, faculty, and staff members, as well as convening public conversations about critical issues in the lives of Indigenous, Black, and Black Indigenous peoples. Our work is not connected to land defense in an abstract way. Rather, the students and others we support and work with are deeply connected to and are from nations and communities within which these struggles are occurring. The IEN has publicly asserted our uncompromising solidarity with and support for Indigenous land defenders, and we condemn their criminalization by the Canadian state. From coast to coast, attempts to prevent Indigenous women from fulfilling their responsibilities as caretakers and stewards of the land must be opposed. Injunctions that deny Indigenous peoples their inherent right to remain on their land and injunctions that authorize police violence against Indigenous peoples must be opposed. We must condemn and take actions to oppose such ongoing uses and abuses of Canadian law and attempts to destroy Indigenous nations and assert control over Indigenous lands, waters, and peoples. And with that, it is so very much my pleasure to introduce our incredible panel of speakers this afternoon. I'll introduce them in the order that they will speak, and they're gonna guide us in thinking about Kanehsata'kehró, Mi'kma'ki, Haudenosaunee at Six Nations, and Wet'suwet'en land and water defense, important lessons from the past that inform this resistance today, and about building solidarity across movements and peoples. And it is especially my pleasure to start with my friend, and also thank you, Sean, for saying I also don't speak Mohawk, and apologize in advance if I name or territory. Sandra Owen Nagon, dear stand-up, is Kanien'kehá, people of the Flint, woman from the Haudenosaunee, people of the Longhouse. Sandra was born and raised in Kahnawake, Mohawk territory located on the south shore of Montreal. She is of the Bear Clan family and a mother of 2 young men. Sandra completed her master's degree at McGill in 2014, and she's currently working on the completion of her dissertation at McGill University. Sandra's doctoral studies focus on pedagogical philosophies tied to Indigenous identity. She is an active journal and book reviewer and was one of the co-editors of a special issue on the TRC and education for the McGill Journal of Education. After Sandra, Sleydo Molly Wickham will speak, who is a Gidimt'en clan member adopted into the Kashyyyk grizzly bear house, originally from the House of Spook. Molly completed her undergraduate degree in Coast Salish territories at the University of Victoria in sociology and went on to earn a Master of Arts degree in Indigenous governance. After completing university in 2010, Molly moved home with her family to learn more to learn more about the land, culture, and traditional governance. Molly has been active in land and water defense action and is the spokesperson for the Gidimt'en camp. Molly is passionate about governance, the health and well-being of the territories, and the transmission of culture, language, and traditional song and dance. Next will be Starla Myers, Kanien'kehá Turtle Clan and from Six Nations of the Grand River Territory. Starla is a journalist for Real People's Media and has been reporting on the Land Back movement at 1492 Land Back Lane. Starla is an advocate for Indigenous voices in journalism and has called attention to the issue that major media corporations and the police work to silence Indigenous journalists as a tool of colonial violence. Starla's work as a journalist also covers racism and anti-Indigeneity in healthcare, violence of colonial state repression, and land back movements across Turtle Island. Next, we'll have Dr. Pamela Palmer. Pamela Palmer is Mi'kmaq citizen and member of Eel River Bar First Nation in northern New Brunswick. Pamela has been a practicing lawyer for 22 years and currently serves as full professor and chair in Indigenous governance at Ryerson University. She has been recognized with many awards and honors for her social justice advocacy on behalf of First Nations generally and Indigenous women and children specifically, and most recently for her work related to murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls. And finally, we will hear from Skylar Williams, a Kanien'kehá land defender, and of course the spokesperson for the 1492 Land Back Lane land reclamation at Six Nations of the Grand River. So to loop back now to Sandra, I introduce you and invite you to share with us. Thank you.
Sego. Oh, wow, Roz, it's so nice to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. Sorry, everyone, I have to say hi to my friend. Nyawa, thank you. I'm giving my greetings to everyone. I'm not sure where to start, but I went through all the questions and everything like that. So I'm just wondering, would you like me to focus more on, keep focusing on the questions or speak a little bit about 1990 in the beginning? What would you prefer, Roz?
I think, Sandra, that we really invite you to share in the ways that you feel are best. The questions that we provided and the introduction that I gave are really to offer you a framework and yeah.
Okay. Well, I'd like to begin. I spoke in Montreal a few weeks back, and I was invited to go, and I spoke there. And there was something that I really wanted to say, or that I forgot to say with share with the people. That's what I want to say. So, in most of us, we understand that a lot of Indigenous and other people too as well, it's not only Indigenous people, we have a connection to land, water, to the environment, and that's global. That's not only in Indigenous cultures, but as we see throughout history, that Indigenous cultures, we do follow a lot of our ways, and our culture follows the earth and the natural world. And one of the things that is really that I see it as a foundation of my own culture in Haudenosaunee culture, the Confederacy of Six Nations. We have what we called our opening address, or Ohon Dugari Wadekwa, as Bonnie was grateful enough to open for us with that. And that foundation of using that as a teaching tool in any type of arena, I find is something that'll teach from young children that I used to teach to adults. And it is giving thanks to every single element that exists on our planet, including us as human beings. Because when we first open for our Ohandogariwadekwa, when we begin and we're going to give thanks, we give thanks to the earth first, because we're all standing on this beautiful earth that has everything that we need to survive as humans, right? And to protect all of that environment is something that as humans we have to do. We have to, because that is allowing us to sustain our lives and our future and our children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. But this past summer with this whole pandemic, you know, I'll share this experience. That's what I wanted to get to. Let me get to it right away. Throughout this summer, I was going through some things, personal things in my life, but what I was, as an Indigenous person, I always go to nature for things when I'm looking for help. So this summer, what I was going through, and the pandemic had something to do with it, you know, causing whatever, you know, and disruption in people's lives. And I'm human as well, so it was causing disruption in my life too. So every day when I would go outside, I would experience something else. One day it would be a hummingbird that would fly right close to me. Another day, the baby rabbits were playing in my yard. Another day, you know, there was just so many things. And then at night I would come out and I would see the stars and the full moon. And then I said to one of my friends, I said, you know, I said this whole summer I would walk outside and I would look around and Ohandogariwadekwa was appearing before my eyes. It wasn't only words, you know, because what we say and what we speak in our languages and in other languages and in English as well, you know, it's like you could say the words, but to experience it is something totally, totally different. You know, to have that experience along with the understanding for myself of how nature and everything in the natural world is important to me and is important to my people. And it's obviously it's important to the global community now, because look at what's happening around the world. It's not only Indigenous people that are stepping up and fighting for what, or, you know, making the stance to fight against governments and corporates that are trying to destroy, you know, the environment. So this is one thing that I really, really believe, that having that experience, because saying it, I've said it so many times. I've done Ohandogariwadekwa in teaching and everything, but at the same time, seeing it and experiencing it is something that is really going to work, and it really works, and it'll change people. It's changed a lot for myself, you know. That was just one thing I wanted to share about that. Okay, so let me get to what I wanted to talk about also, with it stemming from the questions too also that was sent. You know, I was reading them and I was thinking on them a little bit, and I was thinking about the connections. You know, they're asking about what are the connections that can be made between the different nations, Indigenous nations, to the land water defense actions, and what is important to learn from past resistance. So what I was thinking, I said, you know, I see the similarities on how governments say, or they try to say, that they're dealing with us as people. But what bothers me is that the historically governments, they did everything in their power to disregard and disrespect our culture and our ways and the things, how we seen them and how we believe that things should work, or should, how things should be dealt with environmentally, especially with the land and the water. Don't destroy, don't pollute, you know. Those are the things, like, it's been centuries that we've been sitting down having dialogue with government people and the people who arrived here 500 years ago. So 500 years we've been having this dialogue and nothing's changed. And this is one of the problems that I have at my age now. I've been living through this since I was a child. My mother and her family, and, you know, it's like we've been at so many different events, I'll call them events, but so many different types of struggles, okay? Struggles, I use that word then. You know, in Moss Lake, in New York State, in Kanien'kehá, in the other Kanien'kehá, in just up close by here, in 90, there was incident there, in Haudenosaunee, you know, different places that I've gone as a child to, and in my own community as well, seeing, you know, the resistance against too many non-native people occupying homes on the reserve, which left a lot of there were no homes for other people to live. So there was a kind of, I guess you want to say, they told the non-native people they have to leave because the housing situation was very, very bad. And that was like in the 70s, you know, and that caused a lot of pain and within the families in my own community, you know. And because of that, you know, people were saying, oh, you're being racist and that. It's like, it wasn't that at all. The adults who had initiated that were looking at the land. We don't have enough land for our own people to live, for, you know, for houses and homes. So they asked them to leave, so they, you know, so the native people could occupy the homes. Anyhow, that was another struggle, and that caused a lot of a ruckus, and there was RCMP here. There was a big struggle in the community, and I was very young at the time, and I seen some of it going on. So it's nothing new that I've seen the struggle for our rights. And it doesn't have to be just land and water, because the way I see right now what's happening in our modern times is that the rights of every human being is being affected by this water, our water rights and our land rights. Everyone's being affected by it. It's not just me. It's not just my community. It's not just the native people surrounding the areas where they're doing the work or anything like that. You know, we're all gonna suffer from this. You know, there's going to be consequences, and we're all going to be affected by it. And I know, and even if if I'm not directly affected, my grandchildren and their children and their children's children and grandchildren and great-grand, they'll be affected by it. And what is going to be left? I look at my grandchildren now, and I'm afraid because I don't, excuse me. I'm afraid that there won't be anything left for them. And they're not young babies, you know, but some of them are. I have a grandson who's 2, you know, and it's like, what is going to be here for him? And I think that today, that the actions that are going on across Turtle Island is, to me, it uplifts me. And I look at it and I say to my husband, I say to a lot of people, I'm like, wow, I'm so grateful and I'm so thankful that it's not only us anymore standing there, putting our lives on the line, because we could never get through, you know, sitting down and having this dialogue. I just heard on the news in Montreal, the mayor of Montreal is so excited because they're promoting this new, I don't know what it is, what she's promoting, but on the news she says, oh, they had a list, they even put a list, oh, we're going to have new dialogue with the Indigenous community in Montreal. And they're so excited, oh, to bring back more culture, to have more dialogue with Indigenous people, to see what they want, and this. And there was a list of things that they're so excited. Oh, and more culture is going to be presented in Montreal and everything. And I looked at it and I was like, wow, 500 years, we've been doing all of that for 500 years and we've never gotten anywhere. You've taken all our land. We don't have much land to survive off of anymore. You know, to go hunting, we have to travel. And that's here in Kahnawake, because we're surrounded by all communities right around us. You know, so other reserves may have more land and they have that access to land to go hunting. Us, we don't. Not here in Kahnawake. It's really, we have to travel. And that's something, when our men go and travel for hunting, our hunting rights are questioned. They're stopped by police, RCMP, OPP. And, oh, where are you going with that meat? Well, I'm going home. Where do you think I'm going with that meat? That's for my family. But then all of a sudden, oh, well, do you have this license? Do you have that license? Oh, you're not allowed. This is this province. There's 12 million rules. I'm exaggerating, but there's so many rules and laws that prevents us from doing it. And to me, I don't see, how does that make sense? The fishing rights, really? Oh yeah, tell the native people to stop fishing because it's disturbing the industry? Really? I don't believe that. We were here first. The industry came second. And people fish and take that food for their families. So sometimes it's almost like hearing all of this. I've been hearing it my whole life, and I want to see change. In 1990, when I went there, I was a very young mother. My son was only 3 years old. And, all of the other confrontations or confrontations, now I changed the term, confrontations now. And when, as I got older, I started to, become more involved because now I'm an adult. I'm not a child being taken to these places. And when I went in 90, I took my son there because, if something happens, and I figured, hey, if this is the way I'm going out, my son's coming with me. I'm not going to leave him behind, with no mother and no land, so it's like, when I was very young, it was a struggle to understand that. And now as a grandmother, oh my God, I'm getting so emotional. It's so hard I don't want to accept it. Because I know that there's enough land for everybody, but we have to be, I'm not sure what the word is. We have to have love and compassion for one another at the same time, and understand one another. How are we sharing these, and how is this benefiting everybody? Like the dialogue, I know the dialogue has to continue. And I think, yes, it has to continue, because we have to become more educated on everything and know what people are going through and know what the struggles are, and look at all of the things that even like that, all of the people who are supporting us, that are what are they doing? We need to also address them. And it's almost like bringing everything in together and creating something from it. And for my hopes are that it's going to create something very, very positive, and it's going to help us move forward. Because when I look at it, I really, really believe that the dialogue is, I'm trying to word this properly, sorry. It's like the dialogue that we do have with governments, for me, it's like it doesn't get anywhere, but we still have to have it. That's what I mean. You understand? You know what I mean? Like we still have to have it, but it's like it doesn't get us anywhere. And this was and then also on the news when they said the mayor of Montreal, they also said, oh, Premier Legault was looking for something too. He was all on board and saying, yeah, he's gonna do this and he wants to do that with the Native community in Montreal and the homeless and different things like that. And I'm like, wow, the homeless didn't just land there last week or during the COVID, they've been there for a long time. And these relations and talks have been going on for a long time between Quebec and here, Kahnawake, because we're situated in these imaginary lines that makes the province, which is, well, oh, I'm going to be cut off soon. Yeah. Okay.
I don't want to cut you off, Sandra, but I do want to make sure that we have enough room to get, enough time to get to everybody else. And you've raised so many important points that I think will be taken up by the subsequent speakers. That was amazing, and you're just touching my heart so much. It's so wonderful to see you.
I know it's so nice to see you too.
Next, we're going to have Molly Wickham. Sleydo.
Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and Nyawako. What do I do now? Mute off?
You're good. Molly, go ahead.
Hari Sleydo, Sai Sleydo, Sydney, Gidimt'en Hasli, Wutoten is then. I just want to thank everybody for being on the panel today, and to thank you for the invitation. And I want to have a big shout out for all of the people that have been supporting the Wet'suwet'en struggle in the last several years. It really means a lot to us to have the solidarity that's been shown to us, for people to have taken action in all of the different raids over the years, and to continue to support us and follow along. I thank you so much for that, Kanien'kehá. Thank you, Sandra, for all of your beautiful words, and for the beautiful opening and the address, the ceremonial address. I think that's a good way to start things. I want to give a bit of an update on what's going on here in Wet'suwet'en territory. We're in so-called British Columbia, on the West Coast. And there's a lot that's been happening lately with, all the different movements that are happening. It's hard to keep track of everything that's going on in each place sometimes. So we're doing our best to make sure that we're on top of and understanding what's happening in all the different front lines and struggles from coast to coast, and also to keep people updated on what's happening here. So right now, we're struggling against the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which is a frack gas pipeline heading to Kitimat on the west coast, to a huge LNG facility, and exporting, with hopes to export LNG. We've been in this struggle against Coastal GasLink for years and years, against all pipelines for about the past 10 years or so, and things have really come to a head lately. Right now, they're actually trying to drill under Wickham, which is our headwaters, our sacred headwaters that feeds all of our rivers. We can drink right out of this river. That's where we get our water at our reoccupation sites. We have several reoccupation sites within Wet'suwet'en territory, not just Gidimt'en. We have Gidimt'en reoccupation site, there's Untitled, and there's Leksamasiu. And all of those clans, all three clans, have their own reoccupation sites on the territory. Right now, they're trying to do geotechnical drilling under Wickham at the headwaters. There's a lot of RCMP. If you go to our territory, it feels like a war zone every single day. It sounds like a war zone. It looks like a war zone, but it really feels like war zone. There's hundreds and hundreds of workers all over our territories at any given time of the day. There's about 5 different security companies. There's SERG, which is a special detachment of RCMP specifically to address Indigenous people resisting industry on their territories, that are all over our territories all the time, every single day. Currently, there are criminal investigations happening by the RCMP into solidarity blockades, into sabotage, into conflicts that have happened between workers, with workers, and into hunting that's happening on our territory during hunting season by Wet'suwet'en people, that is apparently in breach of the injunction that Coastal GasLink has against us. So there's a lot happening. Things are coming to a head, and there's a lot that people don't know, that this struggle is continuing on a daily basis out in the territory. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but be cognizant of time. And I just want to say that the connections between our movements are probably one of the most powerful things that can happen. If you look at what happened last year, there was several days, 5 days of raids on Wet'suwet'en territory where 27 people were arrested in the end, including Wet'suwet'en matriarchs. That was the second year of raids on our territories at the same time of year consecutively. And what happened was that everybody stood up and supported us and shut down Canada, essentially. And so this is one of the things that I think has been pivotal in the movement for Indigenous reoccupations, Indigenous land back, Indigenous sovereignty, whatever you want to call it, for us to actually have a vision of what freedom and hope look like. So what does being free and being liberated look like and feel like on the ground? And so there's this concept of there's this idea of it, but we don't actually know what that feels like maybe all the time. We don't know what it looks like, what it could look like. And so I think that's really important piece of all of us standing together, is that we're creating this different reality where we are in control, where we aren't the victim of colonization, where we are setting the rules and the boundaries of what our future is going to look like. And I think that that comes from this, it comes from people like you, Sandra, that have spent their whole entire lives resisting, have set that path for young Indigenous people, young Indigenous women to follow. You know, when I first started out and started going to university and started learning about colonization and all these things, you know, it was women like Ellen Gabriel that were my heroes that I looked up to, and I thought, this is somebody that I want to be like one day, to be able to stand up for my people, and to be able to stand strong, and to be able to defend our land, and to be able to speak about it and share that with other people. I think that's one of the most important things that we can do, and be united in that, so that this spreads like wildfire. You know, that's one of the things that we've been saying for years is, you know, what people are like, what do you want us to do? What do you want us to do? Well, we want people to do support actions. We want people our allies and accomplices to act in solidarity with us, and to target certain, you know, groups or people that are doing genocide to our territories, to our people. And we've always said to other Indigenous people, take your own land back, reoccupy your land, occupy your lands, because that's where you have the most strength. And so once we start living that, and once we start doing that, we actually start believing in ourselves, because that's one of the main goals of colonization, is to make us believe that it's not ours, make us believe that we don't have the ability to follow our laws, to live our laws, that our governance doesn't matter, that we don't have any rights or responsibilities as Indigenous people. And so in reoccupying our lands, we actually start to see and feel what that looks like. And the more that we all do it together, the stronger that it becomes. And so we can look back at, you know, things like the Oka crisis and different examples of resistance in the past, and see, you know, what worked, what didn't work, what was the strategy there, what were the tactics that were used, and so how could we, how should we be acting now in the current situation? And so I think if we had a strong, unified strategy from coast to coast, across Indigenous nations, that's what really is going to get the attention of the state. That's what, you know, when last February, when Shutdown Canada was happening, that relationship between the Mohawk people, the Haudenosaunee and Wet'suwet'en, and all of the allies in between, that's what got the federal provincial government to come to the table and say, how do we resolve this? And it wasn't resolved from that. They wanted to have a smokescreen to make it appear like things were resolved. They didn't actually do that. And I don't think that they will. I think that it's something that we have to push, and we have to keep pushing harder until we get exactly what we want as Indigenous people, and whatever that looks like for our communities. And so I think that that's what's really going to help each individual nation grow their movement, and what's helped us in our struggle in the Wet'suwet'en territories, that's helped us immensely. That's helped our own people to believe in ourselves, is that we know that we have the backing of all of these different groups, all these different Indigenous people. We know we have the backing of all these, allies and accomplices all over from coast to coast. And we know that we are strong in our stance, and that we are right and justified and dignified in our stance, and that we will never give up for those reasons that Sandra mentioned, is that we don't want to leave the fight to our children. We are terrified about what that will look like for them if we don't do everything in our power now to stop the destruction of our lands and our waters. We have one of the last clean drinking water sources in our whole territory and in the world, and we're not willing to stand down to protect that at any point and at any cost. And so I think that being unified in that stance, and focusing on the resiliency, and focusing on the fact that we are so strong, and that we have the total ability to shut down Canada, we have the total ability to change the way that this colonizing state functions, and demand that our laws and our governance be recognized. And that's what I see happening from coast to coast right now, is that we're demanding that it's our law supersedes, and our law is the one that lives on the ground. Our laws are designed for us to live sustainably. Our laws are designed not only for us as Wet'suwet'en people, but all of creation within Kanien'kehá, within our territories. And so that takes precedence. And that's what we're seeing happening in all of these different communities, from my perspective, is that we're taking back control of how we do business and how our lands will be managed into the future. And that's obviously being met with huge resistance from white supremacists, from the government, from the state, from the OPP, from the RCMP, the CERG teams here, because they're terrified that this will become the norm. And it already is the norm. Look around at what's happening in the world. That is the norm. And so this is a critical, critical time for us to push that harder, push our agendas that on Wet'suwet'en territory, Wet'suwet'en governance rules. Those are the laws that we follow. Those are the laws that we live on the ground in our territory. And without our land and our water, we won't have the strength to continue to struggle the way that we are now, and the way that we need to. And so we have to have those bases, those reoccupation sites, in order to continue this struggle into the future generations, because that's what our ancestors did for us. They fought hard so we'd have these little pieces of our culture left. They fought hard so that we had our feastal system. They fought hard so that we had land still left to have a connection to, so we knew what we were fighting for. And so we have to do the same for our children and our future generations. Am I over time? I don't know if I'm over time. There's one last thing that I'll just share.
Go ahead.
Somebody was supposed to be keeping my time for me. One last thing that I do want to share is just this idea of our connection and the roots of our resistance, and the connection that we have with different movements like Black Lives Matter, is this idea of, and this social construct of racism that's designed to dehumanize us. And so at every single point in our resistance, the state will attempt to dehumanize us. And you could see that even in in Land Back Lane, in that struggle, that the RCMP start releasing different, different images and different stories about the land defenders there, right? Trying to not only criminalize them, but frame them in a certain way. We've been framed that way. That is exactly the same tactic that has been used since contact in our communities and all across the board in the oppression of Indigenous people and people of color and Black people, that racism is used as a tool to dehumanize us so that the oppression can continue, so that they can dehumanize us, so they could take our land away, and that they could keep our land and that we don't have a right or access to our lands anymore, and that it doesn't matter because we're not quite human enough to deserve to have our land. We're not quite human enough to deserve to have freedom. And so that's where that underlying connection to all of our struggles is, for freedom and liberation, for humanity, for humanness, for respect and dignity for all of our people. And so I think that that's where we all connect in our struggle and demand that, no, we won't stand for any of those forms of oppression any longer. And that everybody else needs to stand with us and demand the exact same thing. So for all of the Indigenous people and in front lines that are doing this work right now, I just want to say, Snekalia, I think that the reoccupations of the territory are so important that I'm looking forward to having more opportunities to stand in solidarity with one another and work with one another. And for our allies and accomplices, there's real people that are on the ground right now committing genocide on all our territories. So who are those people? Look at, in our case, the contractors, the subcontractors, the major people that are actually the RCMP, but the major people who are actually on the territory doing the work to commit genocide, right? Last year, so many people went up against the RCMP and said, stop the violence against Wet'suwet'en people. That was amazing. But the RCMP aren't the ones committing, they are accomplices in committing genocide on our territory. But who are the workers? Who are the companies that are actually committing genocide? Who has CGL hired to commit genocide on our territory? And all across the board in all the movements, because those are the people that are actually on the ground doing the work to kill our territories and to kill our people. And so I ask that people to think about that when they're thinking about solidarity actions and when they're thinking about ways to support us. Outsa, Masai.
Thank you so very much, Molly. Next we have Starla, Starla Myers.
Hey, go. How are ya? Can you guys hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Okay, Sego, I'm Starla. I'm going to speak in English mostly because I'm still learning the language, and I know that one small mistake can mean something completely different and completely inappropriate, so I'll just stick to English for right now. I kind of followed the questions. That's just part of, my personality is following the process and whatnot. But I just want to say niawa to both Molly and Sandra, because how do I really top what they've said? How do I even compare? Am I even important enough in the whole bigger picture of things to warrant anyone listening to me? But I'll go ahead with the questions. So the first question, talking about how we're all connected, and to me the connections are quite simply based on being Ongwehoe and our ties to the land and water, and everything to do with our health and wellness is based on the health and wellness of our water, our land, and our air. It's without that, we're not healthy either. Health is directly linked to our connection and ties to the land. The World Health Organization has certainly pointed out that land dispossession is directly related to some of the disproportionate representation of diabetes in health, heart and stroke, and certainly having a greater incidence amongst Indigenous people. That's unfortunately another connection. And that's why it's so important for us to stick together and ensure that we work together, having that common goal. Now, I do know we quite often hear, thinking of the next generations yet to come, and I had sort of this thought that 5 generations ago, somebody was thinking of me, and their decision making and how they walked their path in life was based on knowing that I would be coming one day and that I would be walking this earth. And for me, that's why it's so important to think about previous actions that have taken place historically, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, all of those, even longer. Those things impact and will continue to impact each subsequent generation that comes along. And that's why it's important for us to consider our history and apply it daily to how we continue to carry ourselves. And much like Molly, I my heroes growing up, it wasn't, people like Wonder Woman or anything like that. It actually was Ellen Gabriel. That was the first hero that defined how I wanted to live my life and how I wanted to represent myself and how I would be active within my community. And that was really important to me. And I met her earlier this year and was completely fangirling. So the possibilities between the Black and Brown communities are absolutely endless. We have the historical alliances that were formed in wars, in neighborhoods, and certainly now just having both populations experiencing criminalization, just overrepresentation in prison systems, and we can really benefit and learn from each other's struggles and be there for each other, show up for their events and certainly open our doors to ours. That's important. It really is to be able to remarry into the historic alliances that I'm aware of. That would just be absolutely amazing, and that's something certainly that I think we can all do better to work on fostering those relationships with the Black community. Now, the next question talked about accomplices and co-conspirators, and just because right now I am facing some criminalization due to coverage that took place within our own territory, I'm going to refrain from giving any suggestions to those two populations. Allies, on the other hand, allies are really important, and sometimes it feels like we want them to do things, but then at other times it's kind of like, what, maybe you're doing too much. Maybe you need to let us tell our own stories and allow us to represent ourselves. And so for me, it's just basically, I concentrate on trying to listen to other voices who don't have aren't necessarily being interviewed, who aren't necessarily being asked to participate in certain events. Like those are the people that I am being an ally by seeking them out as well and boosting their voices. And I think that's what allyship really is all about, is, you know, like through my privilege, I can certainly boost the other voices of other members of my nation. I know that, you know, we see the darker the skin, the less likely they are to get proper attention and accolades, proper service in justice systems, proper service in medical systems. And those are the stories that we need to hear. We need to see how it is a complete systemic issue, that this is actually happening in this day and age. And, you know, not only am I a journalist, but from my nursing profession as well, it boggles my mind that it's still, people are still receiving less than adequate health care because of the color of their skin. Now being, you know, murdered for lack of better terminology, I guess, like losing your life because people have preconceived notions about who you are and what it is that you do in life, and, you know, how the burden on the system, when in fact that is the complete opposite of what we are. You know, it's attention needs to be brought to those specific things, and yeah, showing up on the front lines is great, but, you know, speaking out and changing cultures within systems, that's work for allies as well, because it's not necessarily something that people who work within those systems want to hear from somebody who is part of the marginalized population. And certainly shouldn't have to, you know, be an ambiguous race to have, you know, proper and adequate care. The last thing that, the last question that talked about resiliency and, you know, deficit models. And so this one kind of brought me, I did a lot of thinking about that. That was something that, you know, made me, how people view not only myself, but other people who are, you know, either doing coverage of the events or enacting the actual land reclamations. And one of the things that we always hear is get a job. And I'm like, oh, wow. I guess, you know, for the most part, people still think that there's these tropes that we want to just sit around and, you know, do nothing. And I cannot express enough how much work it is doing these type of actions. Like it's a 24/7 job. And, you know, I know personally sometimes in poor Skylar, I know he'll be up next, but, or in a few people, but, you know, sometimes I just have to call and say, you know, what are you doing about this? What's going on? And that's a really heavy burden to carry. Not to mention, you know, like he's also an iron worker by trade, which is an absolute required skill. But yeah, the deficit models that are prevalent certainly do have people believing that, you know, in order for us to be able to protect our territory, that we have nothing better to do, that we have no jobs, that we're drinking and we're drug users and those type of things. We're on welfare, and that's one of the furthest things from the truth. And that's why it's important for us for everyone to start to recognize that, you know, most times when we're able to be somewhere for those snapshots in time and in those live videos and when there is news being covered, that we're also running home afterwards to take care of our families. We're also going home afterwards to get ready for the next day job that actually puts money on the table. Activism is not only a full-time job, but it certainly is a non-paying job that requires us to have other jobs. And, you know, with the journalist component, it's been very difficult to act according to non-native, non-native guidelines for journalism. There's this impression that we have to be unbiased and that's the only way to tell a story, and that's not necessarily true. It's for my worldview from that Indigenous perspective is that things that I talk about, both health and land, I'm very passionate about both of them. That's part of my life. It's part of my genetic makeup. It's just as important as, you know, my family and in my community, that I am able to speak from the perspective of a person living and experiencing that. So it's, you know, we need to start seeing the person who is cutting down the trees on our territory isn't the productive one anymore. It's the ones who are protecting it. Those are the productive ones. Those are the ones that are making a difference. Those are the ones that we're going to remember. And in several generations ahead of us, those are the ones that are going to be talking about. Nyago, I appreciate you guys inviting me. That was awesome.
It was awesome. And thank you so much. You are so very important and important on this panel, right? And, you know, the visibility that you're talking about of Ellen is the visibility that you all have, right? Like people are looking at you and looking at Molly and certainly looking at Sandra, and there have been over 200 people here listening and being inspired by you all the same way that you've been inspired earlier. So I just,
I appreciate
you're important, Starla.
Yeah.
Pam, do you want to take over now?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. Kwe Nindeluizi, Pam Palmater. I'm from the sovereign Mi'kmaq Nation and unceded Mi'kma'ki and a member of Eel River Bar First Nation. But today I'm coming from the sovereign Mississaugas of Scugog territory, who of course their lands were largely stolen through fraudulent transactions, and they've never received justice for that, just like many of our nations across the country. Thank you to inviting me to this panel. I really appreciate it. I am going to be the bad student because I didn't read any questions. So I hope that my comments actually address some of these questions. But it's a real honor for me to be a part of this incredible group of Kanien'kehá and Wet'suwet'en panelists, because, you know, I follow their work, I'm inspired by them all, and especially their deep commitment to their nations, their peoples, and their lands, and in all different ways. And I think that's what's really come out in what all of the speakers have said, is that there's lots of different ways we can be warriors for our people and our nations, and that all of those things work together. You know, we have the people on the front lines, the people doing the education, the people doing the research, the legal stuff, the fundraising, all of it works together to help one another. And then when we branch that out, and in between nations, we're doing the same thing and reinforcing each other's voices, that makes us even stronger. And then amongst other groups like Black Lives Matter or human rights groups and all of the other social justice and earth justice groups, it just keeps making us, all of us, stronger when we work together. And you know, one of the things that I really hope for the people who are listening or watching this now, or who might watch it in the future, my remarks are also going to be targeted at you, because I hope you really understand just how significant the people on this panel and all of the people that they work with and all of the people who will never be on a panel are to our nations. Our land defenders and water protectors are, like, none of our nations would be here were it not for their strength and determination, because they're really true warriors in mind, body, and spirit. And they make significant personal sacrifices that no one will ever see. And in addition to that, they take great personal risks to their own freedoms, their own financial situations, their relationships with their families and their nations and their communities. And most of that will never be seen. All we will ever see, if we're lucky, is what's seen in the media. And so the sacrifices that they make so that we have a future, so that our kids have a chance at a better future, is incredible. And the leaders are in all directions. So I too had, you know, looked up to people like Ellen Gabriel, but I also looked to people younger than me, like Molly and Kanehsatà and Skylar and everybody else who is in this, who is carrying on the tradition, because the hope is not just in the people who came before us, but it's in the people who are coming up behind us and all working together. And I think that's important. And the people who are watching, please know this, because we literally wouldn't be here, and none of us on this planet will have a future without these people making these sacrifices. And they're often portrayed as troublemakers, outliers, radicals, rogues, and criminals by all levels of government, by different segments of society, and of course by the extractive industry. And that language isn't accidental. It's actually really strategic. Sometimes people think, oh, they're just misspeaking or they're just exaggerating. No, it's very, very calculated. First of all, using that kind of language targets Canadians. So you diminish public support for our collective land defense efforts if you can portray people as dangerous or acting in a criminal way. But it also targets our nations and our communities, our houses, and our clans, and it's intended to sow the seeds of division. You know, it's that long, well-known colonial divide and conquer attitude, which is meant to try to divide our people and make us feel alone. I mean, their ultimate strategy is to isolate people like Skylar at 1492 or Molly at Gidimt'en, to make them feel like they are literally all alone and no one supports them, and they may as well just give up because their own people are angry at them. And nothing could be further from the truth. But they work really hard to try to make us feel alone, so that we won't realize the power that we have behind us. And it's like I said, it's not political rhetoric. I mean, settler governments and law enforcement have literally taken this ideology of us as criminals and dangerous and made this the central feature of their so-called Indian policy. So, you know, not only do Canada's laws, policies, and practices center around the continued theft of our lands and resources, but they've created this legal fiction, literally a mythology around us being threats to national security and threats to public safety, so that they can continue to justify our oppression while they're stealing our lands and resources. And so that people won't feel upset when our people, our land defenders, are arrested or go off to prison. And I mean, for the people sitting on this panel, they know this. This isn't anything new. I mean, since contact, settler governments have literally at different points in times and in many different ways criminalized every aspect of who we are as Haudenosaunee peoples, Mi'kmaq, Wet'suwet'en, you name it. I mean, from our identities and cultural practices outright outlawed, our mobility, our abilities to leave reserves, our traditional and laws and governing practices, even our families and our life-giving abilities has been very much criminalized and controlled by the state at different times. And of course, look at anything related to land or our economies like hunting, fishing, gathering, trade, manufacturing. the governance, maintenance, and protection of our lands and territories, all of that has been highly criminalized and regulated. I mean, think about it. Some of the trades that have been outright criminalized, like the traditional Haudenosaunee practice of growing, manufacturing, and trading in tobacco, something the Europeans didn't even know about before they came here, is now considered contraband and organized crime when it's looked at from their perspective. And they've done a really effective job of trying to convince the public about our criminality. And so when you think about even today, so all of that carries into today, that even the ability to advocate for ourselves, protect our people from racism, violence, and oppression, all of that has been criminalized within anti-terrorism legislation, within the criminal code. They have empowered themselves through their unjust laws to surveil us, count us, assess us, track us, monitor us, report on us, and not just within law enforcement, but also to government departments and the extractive industry of all things. They're not even part of the government, you would think. And so, you know, our criminality is literally, or you know, the criminalization of who we are is literally a fundamental part of the extractive industry's inappropriate relationship and undue influence with governments and government officials, and their relationships that go back and forth. First they're in government, then they're on extractive industry boards, and so on and so forth. And they have both jointly worked very hard and effectively with all of their money, resources, and law enforcement to reinforce that criminality to achieve the ends that they want. And so, you know, knowing that, here's the ironic thing, that, you know, everything that we stand for, everything about who we are is about love, it's about peace, it's about protection, it's about obligation to one another, to our neighboring nations, to the people we're intermarried with, to all of the plant and animal nations, all of that. And basically, it's who we are and our fundamental values as Native peoples. That is the only way that we are literally going to save this planet. Yet, you know, Canada has constructed us as the villain in this story, as the terrorist. Yet, ironically, it's Canada that's the outlaw, because in order for them to do this, they have to break all of their own laws. They have to break their own constitution. They have to break treaties they signed. They have to break all of the international rights that they have signed on to. They literally have to be criminals themselves to do what they're doing to us. And as we know, genocide is the worst crime that can be committed on this entire planet, and they're guilty of it. So although they've worked really hard to criminalize us, they are in fact the criminals. And we've only survived at this point from genocide because of the fact that we have been criminally indigenous, which means that we have broken every unjust Canadian law in order to be Indigenous. And that's how we have survived. We may be, you know, we may be portrayed as terrorists, we may be called terrorists, but we know who the terrorists are. Someone come and visit Mi'kma'ki for a while. You want to see domestic terrorists? Then just take a look at those non-native fishers who are burning buildings and vehicles and making threats both online and in person about digging graves to put our people in, you know, dumping out and killing our lobster catches, and doing the same kinds of threats and intimidation to all the local buyers so that we don't even have anyone to sell to. They would rather us starve to death and burn to the ground than share a fraction of what is our own resource. And I think the most important thing about our solidarity as nations coming together is that we have the power to expose it all to the world. We're not limited anymore by begging mainstream media to put our voices out there. We have social media, we have the internet, we have the power to educate. And it's that education that is going to be the power. Because remember, who's the real governments on Turtle Island? It's always been the people, always. We may have spokespeople, but they're not the power, the people are. And the more educated they are, then the more empowered they are to take action. And remember, you know, this the kind of revolution that we need moving forward to support and empower all of this Native resistance. Doesn't have to be everyone. Everyone doesn't have to be in a consensus. So it's okay if not everyone agrees, because keep in mind, we're all colonized people, and we all deal with decolonization in a different way, and we're at different stages. Our people are going to come along at different stages. So it's absolutely essential that we wrap our arms around people like Molly and Skylar and make sure that they know they're not alone, and make sure that the government knows, oh, we are so behind them. And not just people in Canada, but people in the US and many other countries. And because of that, and because of the solidarity we've built with other groups like Black Lives Matter, we have the power to save this planet. And I believe we will, because of what we're doing now here today and in so many other places. We are getting our voices and the facts and information out there, and we are always coming at this from love and peace and wanting our human beings and our spirit ancestors and all of the plants and animals in this planet to be healthy, happy, safe, and secure. And that is righteous, and that is just. And I think if we focus on that, that Canadians will see just how unjust their own governments are, and will eventually shed them in exchange for something better in the future. So thank you. Malalyag.
Pam, you are such a force. Thank you so much for that. And certainly, last but certainly not least, welcome, Skylar. So happy you could make it. Please go ahead.
There you go, everybody. Yeah, live from Land Back Lane. And so we're managed to find a nice quiet spot out in the part of the area that isn't developed yet, or isn't, the development hasn't started yet. So here at Land Back Lane, like as I'm, you know, kind of glancing around, it's an area of, you know, 27 acres that is been completely flattened of every blade of grass, every tree, every shrub, and it's all been bulldozed under, and it is now a barren bit of clay that is, you know, where there's bits of water, or the weeds are starting to grow, and you know the bits of life that, you know, once was this spot are starting to come back. And I guess just where we're at today, like the barricades up with you know, highways and railways dug up, and it is a hard spot to be in, to know just how big a force that the OPP is trying to exert, how much Canada and certainly the province is trying to push to get our people off the land here. And so for us to make the humble stand, to be able to, you know, remain in that peaceful stance for the last 111 days today. And so this stance for us is seeing, you know, rubber bullets buzzing by our ears. One young man, I had to pull taser darts out of his back. Another guy had his face dragged along the asphalt in front of the development. And so it's been a traumatic scene here over the last several months. And I know some of the panelists today, like Starla, has seen some of that firsthand, and has, you know, been down here as some of these things have unfolded, you know. And Pam, I know we've had several conversations about all of this. And so like this constant threat is something that a lot of our people are dealing with all the time. And so for us to be able to come together and, you know, looking at some of the questions that you had, and you know, for a lot of Native communities across all of Turtle Island, that bit around unity is really, really, really difficult. You know, certainly in this country anyways, like the Indian Act stuff for the last 100 years now, you know, has created those divisions, has created massive divides in our community. you know, and these governments and the police, the RCMP before the OPP, and the, you know, the Brits before that, have all looked for those cracks in our community to be able to drive wedges in. And so for me anyways, that bit around that unity piece has to start at home. And we really need to do that heavy lifting within our communities to be able to you know, to grow and to heal and do all of that hard work of healing from those, you know, for, you know, us here at Six Nations, it's like 96 years since the, you know, Indian Act has come in. And so for us to do all of that healing, to do all of that heavy lifting, we need, you know, the space and time to be able to do that. And so I know here a lot of folks have been talking about a moratorium on development and what that looks like, and how we can push that forward, you know, respecting all of everybody's voice in our community. And I know for a long time now, our community has been, you know, all of our communities have been, you know, whether it's residential school or, you know, now it's over incarceration of our people, under policing, over policing, like the list goes on and on. And so, so for us, for me, that bit of unity it's got to start at home, and we need to be able to start to build those relationships. Certainly across Turtle Island with all of our Owén people across the country, across North America, for us to be able to amplify each other's voices. Because that's the thing, is when there's a call out for whether it's boots on the ground or solidarity actions. I know when Wet'suwet'en stuff was going on out there, we blocked the highway here. And actually when I was arrested on August 5th for 1492 when the cops raided, I was charged with blocking the highway in February and March. We held the highway for quite a few weeks, 6-7 weeks, I think. And so it was I think that's kind of part of that dialogue that we need to have, because like these are the things, as we were, you know, nations unto ourselves before all of this, and all of us had relationships that we need to pick those relationships back up and start to understand that those reserves that they put us on, you know, what they thought were going to divide us and keep us from, you know, sharing and trading with each other, and all of the things that the colonists did to be able to try and keep those divides within all of our different communities. Now with the, you know, phones and internet and social media, now we have all of these communities that they thought they could take advantage of by running all of these power lines and pipelines and dams and all of the colonial infrastructure that they have. They ran all of that through all of our backyards. And now for us as communities to be able to say, like, you know, when something happens in Mi'kmaq or Wet'suwet'en territory, or you know, it doesn't matter where it is, if we can amplify each other's voice by taking from them the things that they've taken from us for the last, you know, 500 years. You know, this is something that can amplify each other's voices in ways that, you know, we've never been able to do without the communications that we have now. And so for us to take advantage of those opportunities to stand with each other in solidarity and amplify those voices. If you can't get your boots on the ground in Wet'suwet'en, if you can't get your boots on the ground in Mi'kmaq territory, then you know what? Then you need to get your boots on the ground in your own backyard. Because that's the thing, is when we stand together, there is nothing that there's no call out that can't be respected, because we as a community, when we are a community, we are able to amplify those voices in ways that, you know, there's no government, there's no police that won't be able to hear it. And so with all of the kind of ally support from, you know, whether it's Black Lives Matter or non-native in general, is, you know, a lot of us in our community are going to be grateful forever for the help that we've gotten from, you know, people of all races and all from all the places, because we wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here 111 days later without all of them. And it has been an amazing bit of community that has built up around 1492 and all of the people that came in here with us. Like it's been an amazing 111 days to really, you know, feel that love from, you know, both settler and Indigenous communities alike. You know, to see people drive here from, you know, days and days travel away to come and, you know, pitch a tent and cut wood and help build and do all the things. And again, I would like to extend that invitation out again to anybody to make that call out, because right now, this that colonial enforcement of these injunctions that have been used throughout all of Turtle Island to be able to, you know, to silence and force the OPP or the RCMP or whatever policing agency it is in your territory. You know, we've had to bear the brunt of all of this, and so for us to, you know, to create that unity amongst, you know, all of those, whether that's again like Black Lives Matter, whether that's, you know, different settler communities, like we when we stand together are able to amplify each other's voices in the most amazing ways. And I can't stress enough how grateful and appreciative I am for everybody and all that they've done to be able to boost the cause. Is, you know, when they came in on August 5th, there was 100 OPP to arrest 9 of us, you know, and so now that there's as many as there is, I don't know what that force would look like. And so as long as we can keep those boots on the ground, as long as we can keep people warm and fed, we're going to be able to maintain our camp here, and we're going to maintain the push to get our land back. And as far as I'm concerned, is the feds in the province want to push to get negotiations going. Like, as far as this land goes, like this land is ours, and this isn't part of that negotiation anymore. Our people have had to see bullets fly past their heads. They had been tasered and shot at, and you know what? This, and for all of us, this is those days of being able to negotiate who this belongs to is well over. And so if you want to negotiate about what a moratorium looks like, you want to negotiate what nation to nation relationship building looks like, absolutely, I'm in for that. But when you draw guns on women and elders in our community, you can expect that our people will stand up for that. And you can expect for all across Turtle Island that people will stand up alongside us, just like we will stand up alongside any of them. And so I like to say my thanks to all the panelists and the people listening. Like, it's a real honor to be on this panel with you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Skylar. Thank you for your work. Thank you for showing up. And to all of you, all of the panelists, this has been so inspiring, and so many of the questions and comments. I mean, quite frankly, there's a lot more comments than questions. And those comments are about how very inspiring listening to you all has been for people who are both Native and non-Native, so people who are on their own Indigenous territories in their own communities, also we couldn't be more grateful. On behalf of the IEN, I just want to again thank you all so much for being here. And I think I'll pass it now over to Katie from the SJE Solidarity Group.
Hi, thank you so much to our panelists for all those amazing insights and connections that were made. They were so powerful, and I'm just so appreciative on behalf of myself and SJE Solidarity with Wet'suwet'en. So thank you so much for making the time to be here. We are so grateful. As we come to a close in this webinar, I just wanted to say thank you as well to our sponsors who helps make this event possible. So we will be highlighting these sponsors as well later in our follow-up email. I also want to say a special thanks to Sean Kinsella, Director of the 8th Fire, for doing the introduction, Bonnie Jane Miracle for doing an opening acknowledgement and a closing. Rosalind, thank you so much for moderating. On behalf of IEN, Julie Blair, thank you so much for all your help in co-organizing this event. And Varun Malik, the business officer at SJE, for all their help as well. And then, of course, again, a special thank you so much to our speakers, Sandra, Pam, Sleydo, Molly, Starla, and Skylar. Thank you again for being here.